Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis show. Man, I am excited because a brother from the regiment, one of my very, very good friends, somebody who taught me a lot of lessons, not publicly available, but a lot of life lessons many, many years ago. Yes, Sergeant Major retired Bruce Parkman. I just love saying that. Brother, how are you doing today, man? Good to see you.
Hey, Otis, man, it's great to see you. Great to see your son, Cam, man. I really appreciate the invite, man. I haven't seen your face in a while. I go to these rugby tournaments. I keep thinking, I see Jim Donovan. I said, I know Otis is here this time. I know he's going to surprise all of us, and just show up. So,
Yeah, I wish. I got way too much metal aligning my spine to get out and play on the pitch anymore.
no, well, here's the thing now. Like we play aspirin every year now, and we've got a huge social section that comes up, and they just cheer us on. They run waters out, and every year more of us and more of us join that part of the club because we're all like, dude, this year the casualty rating at the first we were combat ineffective by the end of the first match. We had like out of 50 of us, we had like almost 20 cap tears. Oh, dude, hamstring pulls. Everybody's walking around. We had to borrow people to do like the second or third game. It was everybody's 60. It was crazy, man.
Yep. Some things will never change, will they? No.
God,
well, man, tell us what this project is for concussions. I'm really curious what the studies are that you've been doing and how that's going to make a change. That's a very broad, but I want to start with the base of it and just get an idea of what's going on with the studies that you've been doing.
So, I mean, as your audience may or may not know, we lost our son 2 years ago. And I'll be graphic. I mean, he ran off Pulpit Rock. I mean, we analyzed his phone. He had a healthcare op. And I don't know what makes a kid at that time. I'm like, how did my son, who was unbelievably loved, never knew any trauma, any pain, was always secure, was just a generous, kind-hearted, compassionate man. He just ran off a cliff head first, leapt his death. And so, in a hole, I had to figure out why my son wasn't here. I had no clues. All we had was one video saying I've been schizophrenic and depressed for 3 years, and I've been fighting it, and I can't do it no more. And he was tired. So, it's funny how God works, in lives when you're moving. And I got the coroner's report, and the coroner's report, said, hey, unfortunately, your son took his life. And I'm like, why? And I asked the coroner, I said, how does this kid with this, this amazing young man with no symptoms at all run off a cliff? Then he goes, did he play sports? And I said, yeah, he played 3. He was a wrestling captain, a football player, and a snowboarder. He goes, oh. He goes, well, I started a CTE assessment. I'm like, what's that? He goes, the NFL disease, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And I go, he says, I have no answers for you, Mr. Parkman. He says, but you need to go, you probably should check that out. So long story short, I called up a foundation. The girl called me back. I told her about Mac and his 10 years of playing of what we now know as concussive and subconcussive sports. And when he was playing, he was a football player from July to November. Then wrestling would pick up November to March. Then we would ski until there's no snow, bro. So we would go into April or May. You know how it gets in, Breck sometimes. We've been very blessed. We own a home up there. Well, she heard that story. She goes, your son's brain never got a break. And that sent me into a big hole of research. And what I found out is that millions and millions of parents like me are allowing their kids to play concussive sports before their brains are ready for it. These kids' brains are developing. The brain is the most intricate and complex organ that we have. It is estimated by one of the doctors that there's more neural connections in a brain than there are particles in the universe. That came from Dr. Alan Hamilton. Yet we take these brains while they're developing, and in football, we put a helmet on. In rugby, we go right for it. Hockey, we check. Soccer, we head balls. And what we're doing is we're interfering with key developmental processes that God or Darwin, depending where you come from, intended not to be messed with. And the result is when you mess with those developmental processes, and I can go a little science on you too, you end up with mental illness. What my son did was the culmination of mental illness, which was suicide. We are finding tens of thousands of adults right now struggling with mental illness, all with significant concussive histories, to include loss of conscience. I mean, I've been knocked out on the rugby field so many times. We're finding children in addiction centers, in mental health treatment centers right now that are medicating because they have anger, impulsivity, depression, sleep disorders, eating disorders, light and noise sensitivity. And everybody's treating them like you've got a mental health issue, of course, but nobody in this country is asking them, do you play concussive sports? How long have you played them? How many of you played them? So that's where we're at right now. And we'll dig into this as we go, but we are uncovering an iceberg of an epidemic of mental health problems caused by the love of parents whose kids want to play sports. And we say, go ahead. Who dies from football? Who dies from rugby? Yeah. I've got a dead kid, and I need parents to understand that in my opinion, contact sports should be an adult sport, because by then you're responsible for what you do with your noggin. Until then, you're not, you're a child. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to hear. The compromise right now is high school, because we're saying at least wait till most of the developmental processes are completed by 14. Okay. So you can play, touch rugby, you can play flag football, you can play no check hockey, no head soccer, right? After that, one sport, you're still rolling the dice, you should be okay. But you start doing what we're doing now, you can play for the town, you can play for the school, then these travel teams, right? And all this other stuff. We're taking concussive sports and we're making it a year-round activity, and it is just too much for a kid's brain. That's my mission, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people don't tend to think about, when we think of CTE, we think of the NFL athletes who, the linemen who played 15 years in the NFL. And we can all look at it and we can wrap our head around that. And then I think when you dig into it more, kind of what you're getting at, you said the tip of the iceberg, is how complicated the brain is, and with the concussive damage. Because, we were talking about Marion Barber just a few days ago, the Cowboys running back who recently passed away. No cause of death has been released yet. But, I was saying he's a freaking power back in the NFL, probably had 1,500 carries or something like that for the Cowboys. Yeah. And he's saying he heard addiction and these kind of things. It's the same side. Are two different sides of the same coin at that point.
Absolutely.
All of these different things that we think are separate, there's a lot of connections there that goes back to, like you're saying, that concussive damage.
And when did he start playing sports? I'd like to dig into his career. I'm finding a lot of almost every athlete that's had CTE played, not just, maybe Pee Wee ball, but middle school, definitely high school, then into college, then into semi-pro or on the team as a pro until they made it big time in the league. And that's, a decade or more of trauma to an organ that is just not to be messed. And the consequences for athletes. I mean, look at all the NFL players or any NHL players, all these guys with impulsivity, rage issues. Antonio Brown, that is brain damage. It's not CTE. When those people die and they open up their heads, they're going to find CTE. CTE is the physical manifestation of that trauma. The psychological manifestations of the brain damage are mental illness. And that's the thing we want to key on, because you can identify mental illness. You can't identify CTE until postmortem. Now we're doing some amazing research that we'll talk about in a little bit. But you're right on it, Cam, is like all these things are connected. But the common denominator across this entire athletic spectrum is mental illness. That is what, some of it could be genetic. Some of it could be you're just, using too much drugs. But we are not assessing any of these children that are being seen for mental illness for their sports histories, their concussive sports histories.
What changed? I mean, because, you and I grew up, I know, we both grew up playing sports. And, you get your bell rung, right? That we were in the age of getting your bell rung, suck it up and get back out there.
Get back out there.
Yeah. But I feel like, is it more awareness or is it more prominent, in this day and age with our kids?
I think, well, it's a couple of things. Okay. Back when we were kids, when you played football, you were probably a one sport athlete, right? And you played one sport, one season a year. And I think the amount, and you usually played it in high school, but middle school sports wasn't that much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think back then we didn't have travel teams. We didn't have Pee Wee. We didn't have a lot of this. Sports now is all about money. It's not about playing a sport. You used to play for your high school. Well, now you can join up and play rush soccer and play, whatever. It's $900 in Colorado Springs. I don't even know what COVID money is to play hockey for a season, right?
Yeah.
Everything's about the dollar. It's not about the sport, right? So now you can play these concussive sports for a lot longer than you used to in our day. The other part is the research, Otis. I've got over 100 papers identifying trauma-related brain damage links to mental illness, and that knowledge and the logic of taking a brain, encasing it in something hard, and beating it around, and the sharing, and you and I, we have brain damage. I will tell you this right now. Mm-hmm. We are rugby players. we're Green Berets. We have got some form, and we will experience some form of cognitive decline over the years, but we never, played like some of these kids are playing. So, and the other thing is, for years, guys have been hurting themselves and dealing with this, but the connections have never been known. The NFL or whoever's been playing it down, whatever. So I think we're just getting smarter about what we're doing to our kids' brains. And as more and more research about how delicate and fragile yet critical they are, that brain, it determines everything your kid will be. It'll determine their socioeconomic status. It'll determine their success in life, their quality of life. If you impair that, we are degrading our kids' futures by allowing them to jostle their brain before it's ready. In my estimation, that's my now enlightened opinion, because I failed when my son had his first concussion. He was suplexed in a wrestling mat. He didn't have a loss of concussion. You know how many concussions I've had, bro? Woken up on a rugby field. Oh, there's the running down and make another tackle, right? I'm like, okay, he's at the doctor's. My wife's taking care of him. Medical specialist. He's cleared. A season or two later, he had 3 concussions. But check this out. The last one was 3 years before he died. The damage, if you keep the subconcussive hits going, keeps going. It's irreversible. The brain stays swollen. It can't heal. And then when it heals wrong. All that is all connected to mental health issues that we're seeing every day in our children. It's crazy.
And, you said a couple different things there that I think really tie together. One, it's about the dollar, and then about how it affects the socioeconomic status moving forward. And I think when a lot of people look at sports, it's, for a lot of people in a lot of different environments, it's a ticket to different places, whether it's college, you're thinking NFL or anything like that. And then there's this, frankly, really sad irony that I'm putting together as we're going through this conversation of, you get your kid and you're like, okay, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of the hood. And we've talked with plenty of people that have that kind of a story and success stories like that. But then they put them out in Pee Wee football, and they're over there just running around like a freaking pinball machine. And so and then the sad irony of that is you're creating these two outcomes on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Your kid's either going to be in the NFL and he's still going to have those concussive issues, but they're going to make a bunch of money, or they're going to have those concussive issues. They're not going to go that far, and then they won't be able to be as functional in the rest of society, away from sports. And I think that goes hand in hand with what we talk about a lot as coaches, where it's like you have to look at your life past sports. And it's the hardest thing. I say this like, I was talking with my friend last night about this, how hard it is as a coach to pull the kid off the field who got his bone on. Mm-hmm. And how hypocritical you feel, because I know I would have told my coach to F off and gone back on the field if that was me. But they
tried it once.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where high school is so important, in getting to football. But yeah, I mean, you bring up some excellent points there where, we can no longer, are we being hypocritical when we say, you got to get off the field and all that? But when you go back to Pee Wee football and what these kids are going to become, I mean, a college athlete has a 1.7% chance of hitting the NFL. The average kid has less than an 0.8% of even getting close. So, I mean, all right, are we really getting out of the hood by giving our kid a ball and telling them to go run as hard as you can and knock that knock him out and get him, right? Same stuff, right, coach? Just get up there, get back in there. Or are we going to say, all right, here's your video game machine. All right, we're going to start getting you into some college level classes. We're going to focus on, we know we can create a successful adult by focusing on education. We don't know if we're going to create that NFL multimillionaire by putting a helmet on him at 5 years old, because the odds are stacked against him. I mean, so to your point, and there are like Nick Bunicati, some of these old players from the 70s, like they wish they never played football, because of the problems they're having. I just found out here in Tampa, we've got some players here, famous players that people will tell me under their breath, man, they're hurting, dude. These guys are in their 40s and 50s, and they're having problems right now. I mean, and then that goes back to the NFL. Do you know when the NFL healthcare benefits start? Talk about playing the odds, man. You have to be in the NFL for 4 years. You know what? You know how many players make it 4 years? I mean, dude, they've got it. They got it wired,
like
right?
2.7 or 3 or something like that, isn't it?
That's right. And it's like 3.6. So we're going to start it at 4. They ain't dumb, man. But you hear about these players who have given it all. They're adored. They're revered. They're loved. And now they're struggling, man. They're struggling. And then you got to ask yourself, was it worth it? And I don't know, man. I know that celebrity, that fame, man, it's got to be like cocaine, dude. I mean, it's got to be great to be on the field and, hearing the crowd. I mean, it's got to be crazy, but and here's a question for you, Otis. I mean, you're a high school coach, and Cam, you coach high school too?
Coaching college now. College and then the little ones.
So here's my point. If your kid is a natural athlete and he's going to really have a chance to get into college, make the NFL, you're going to know it. Like I listen to these coaches say, well, middle school and people, they got to know how to play when they get to high school. I call bull, because every kid spends 2 years on that bench waiting to be the junior so they can start, right?
Yes.
So my point is, and I'd like to get your point on this, is I feel if you're a natural athlete in any sport, if you wait till high school, at least slim those chances down of screwing your life up, you're going to shine as much, and you're not going to be a burnt out child athlete when you get to that point. I mean, what do you guys say to that?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I asked a question. I don't know if I can do that.
No. We like that.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I'll use Camden's sister, Sierra, as an example. She was a great soccer player. Started playing when she was probably like 4 and all through that time. And she was burned out in high school. At the end of high school, she thought she wanted to play college ball, and we went around and toured. And then when she found out how much more, fortunately, I'm sure she's got some damage because she headed the ball a lot as a kid. But as far as that burnout, that's another thing, now she's a physical therapist, and we've talked with her about this also, is that repetitive, on top of the brain damage that you're talking about with the concussive sports, she's identified that the repetitive sport. So like the multi-sport kid does okay joint wise, because, there's variance, but because we've become so specialized with our kids in this, where, you're playing football year round. I mean, I drive by the high school this afternoon and they'll be out there playing, organized practices, not just kids picking up, organized practices with the coach playing football, and it's nonstop year round. So they're doing the exact same movements. And she said she sees kids that are, 14, 15 years old with repetitive damage like you used to see from a 35-year-old, somebody had been playing professionally for 10 years.
I remember she told me she had a 12-year-old come in at one of her clinics that had freaking Tommy Johns, because he was pitching for so long already, and they just kept pushing it forward.
Well, what you brought up, Otis, is the biggest gap in everybody thinks concussive sports. The biggest contributor to mental illness right now is what they call subconcussive trauma. Mm-hmm. The repetitive RHI, repetitive head injuries that your daughter pointed out. That is what's causing all the damage. It's not the concussions. It's the fact that if they ever get concussed, if they don't, because of the repetitive hits, those hits hit the brain and they cause damage at the microcellular level. This is all research. And then what happens is because the brain gets continuously pounded, it stays inflamed, it stays swollen, there's free radical, and all this craziness that goes on. All that craziness prevents the brain from healing. And the two things the brain needs to heal, blood and oxygen. You're swollen, you're not getting blood or oxygen. And so what we've discovered, subconcussive trauma is absolutely like, it's like this quantum physics area of research that nobody's ever touched, even when it comes down to children. Yet everybody knows it's happening. Every time that football player hits with that comes off the line, that is a subconcussive blow. Every time. And the amount of hits right now are going at, like, I've got some studies, 14 to 1600 per season. And do you know how hard they're hitting? Okay. The average hit was 28 G's in one of these studies. 25 G's is the equivalent of running your car into a wall at 30 miles an hour. So by my calculations, when a kid gets done with college, he's been exposed to the equivalent of over 1,600 car crashes or something like that. I have to go back into my nuts. That's what we're doing to these brains, you know? And when you start looking at the math, it's like, okay, you're waiting till high school. Even if I let you play, I don't care. After that, when you're 18, you do what you want. You can vote, you can join the army. You're all right. That's why I'm getting to this point where I think the damage that we're doing to these kids, I think research is going to show that we've been making mistakes. I would say, Otis, I don't know, you know, in the 70s, I think around the 80s when you started to see this Pee-wee and all this travel, and then everybody there was no sports leagues unless the town ran it, right? There was none of this paid money and play sports. Now it's a business, right? Yeah. And so, and they'd say, oh, well, in order to get them to play in middle school, let's start them at 5 years old, and I'll start a league down there. And next thing you know, they're going to have infants playing fucking, you know, pardon my French, football in a couple of years. And I'll be rocking around, banging each other with helmets because somebody's going to figure out how to make money off it, you know. But in the end, this is our treasure. This is what God's given us to take care of. And behold, I failed my son because I didn't know none of this. You know, and that's so yeah, I mean, man, good points, man. But that subconcussive trauma that's the pain, man. I mean, we see it in all sports too. Wrestling, rugby, lacrosse, soccer, hockey. I mean, you know, and then I guess what bothers me when I did my research and I was in such a deep hole is that it's like, wow, this is actually logical too. It makes sense. Once you understand, when you talk to neurosurgeons, they're like, my kid will never, I mean, they know. I'm like, well, why aren't you yelling? Like, you know, one of the guys, a big name, I can't bring him up, but I was talking, he says, my kids will never play, you know, never play sports. I go, you've written research papers on this in books. Well, why aren't you yelling this out to parents and saying, don't, you know, because my life's wrecked, bro. I mean, I got to live. I got to keep going for the people that I love here. But man, that was my only boy. He was everything to me. And now this is my mission to talk to you guys and, you know, and get the conversation going and tell people how I messed up and what I've learned. And if I was you, I always watch up the people with babies that go, hey, you want some parental advice you'll never get right now? They go, yeah, what you got? I said, and everyone, I've talked to over 1,000 people since Mac went upstairs. And I have yet, I mean, we're talking coaches. One guy came up to my son's truck. I got it all wrapped. I go, hey, can I help you? He goes, yeah, I was checking out your foundation. He was an Ivy League offensive line coach. He was on vacation where I live on Anna Maria Island. I said, so what do you think about this stuff? And I told him about Mac. He goes, oh, dude. He goes, 10 years ago, I was, you know, just like you, right? Oh, just get up there, get back in there. He says, now, if I even think they're hurting, he says, I'm pulling them, dude. You know, it's like, it ain't worth it, man. You know, and I think they should just add more people to the team, you know, because, you know, when you got a concussion, you got to be out. You know? Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, you reference some of like the business aspect of, you know, starting at a younger age. And it's, you know, whether it's somebody wanting to make money or the parents wanted them to do better, all those different like incentives. I think the interesting thing, and this is what I loved when our first conversation about this, Bruce, was that when you look at the outcome and what you're trying to get, you can get that outcome without those things. If you talk like, and I didn't play much football, but you start talking about the skills you learn here. I'll use touch rugby as an example. Like I can actually talk about it, but like the skills you get from touch rugby, translate into rugby, full contact.
Absolutely.
And the kids who play just touch rugby, the skills that they have are going to be so much better than the kids who are out there tackling. Because
you have
to tackle, you don't have to learn shit. You just run through somebody. I
used to hate those guys, by the way. I used to call them the slippery bastards. I'm like, you were right there, and now you're not.
Where'd he go?
Oh, he's got another. I guess I'll walk down for points, right? No, to your point, though, you're absolutely right. I just, even flag football, the moves that you have to use besides saving the brain are, I mean, if the NFL really wanted to, in my opinion, and I'm not the first guy to say this, but if they really wanted to say, right now, participation in football is in decline. And I'm going to keep pressing it to get even steeper because these are God's children, man, And the only thing to reverse it, do you know that when soccer and hockey went no head, no check, participation rose by 30%?
Wow.
Yeah. And then you get the advantages of, if you're not checking in hockey, you got to learn how to skate around. Flag, touch rugby, you got to learn the skills. You got to find the gap. You got to get the second phase and, know where the ball is. You don't get that awareness when you're getting ready to get tackled or you're tackling somebody. Hell, I don't think I've ever passed the ball, and I've been playing rugby for 30 something years. I'm a prop.
I can verify that you've never passed the ball.
I wouldn't know what to do with it. And it would be a crappy pass anyways. But yeah, great point, Cam.
And how much better of a rugby play? And I could speak this, to it at the college level. I see, and it's weird to me because I started playing in 8th grade, and that was like, oh my gosh, you started so early when I was playing. And now I'm seeing these kids who've been playing even longer. And it's interesting because you will see kids who played, come into college, they played for 8 years. And you'll see 2 kids, both played for 8 years. And one of them has all these skills. The other one had an early growth spurt and he has no skills because he can run people over and he never had to learn. I use this example all the time when I talk about coaching of my freshman year at U of A, when I realized that I'm no longer supposed to run the ball because I did an 8-man pick and I got blown up by the open side flanker, slammed to the dirt, probably got a little something because of it there on that one. And then I had this realization like, oh, that's not my job anymore. And I adjusted my game for it. But if you can keep doing that, then you never have to adjust your game and you never grow as a player. So again, going back to the outcome, if you want them to be better players, this is in line with that. And I think that's, again, like that's the thing that I love talking with you about this is it's not you're not disagreeing with the outcome or all these things. You love rugby. Like
I'm trying to get you to the outcome, Yeah. I tell people I'm all about smacking up another guy, dude. I'll run it. I used to take on 300 pounders. They used to call me the micro prop. They weighed like $195. They're like, and they'd look at me. But once I locked them legs out of my little stubs, they weren't pushing me around. But to your point, I envied the guys that could could always toss the ball, right, and get it. And running people over is not a skill. Okay, that is not a skill. You're not helping your team by breaking yourself and running into bigger dudes and not chucking, not getting rid of the ball in the right time in the right place. So I'm absolutely behind you. The skills rugby players, that's why I guess they say the European teams always beat up on a lot of the other teams. They were skilled players. They played skilled rugby, not brute rugby. Like I guess, South Africans or some of the, other countries.
Even like you said, like there's not a skill to run someone over. The funny thing there is I would even say there is a skill there, but nobody freaking learns it. Like I say this all the time with my freshman U of A, they get tired, my forwards there, they get tired of me saying this. Run like a skinny guy. Because if you run like a big guy, you ain't gonna do anything. If you run like a skinny guy, you learn how to run. Then you a big guy, you learn how to run like a skinny guy. Then all of a sudden you can take that to the next level. But again, if you never have to learn that, then you're just going to hit that ceiling. You're just going to keep trying to run people over, and you're going to your point, get more and more of those impacts because you're not playing smart, you're playing hard.
How much do you think that goes to our macho culture that instead of dipping the ball and being a pansy, you actually took it in for the ruck or whatever? I mean, do you think, I think this machismo stuff really helps a lot of people make some bad decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, well, I think it gets mind of machismo going when we actually win the game. So pass the damn ball. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
So how do we affect change on this, Bruce? That's you've done some amazing research, collected a lot of data. How do we affect change?
Well, I wrote a book It's called Youth Contact Sports and Broken Brains. And I made it small. It's literally a 1 hour read. In 5th grade English, I usually had the editor. I said, make this for an Army guy like me. So they went through it. Even my research all dialed in, but I put one of the moms said, look, I'm curious. I want to know where this comes from. So all the football, they're all at the end of it. But we wrote a book. We're going to publish on the 22nd of this month, ebook. And then print will be after that. We made it cheap. It's $5 for the ebook, $10. It's not about raising money. You know, God's been good to me. I don't need it. But all the money, we've already made a pledge. You know, no family member will take a dime of this money. All the money goes to fund research. And we can talk about some of the amazing research that we're funding right now and raise awareness. So to your point, Otis, it's all about raising awareness, because every parent that I've talked to about this, because it is scientific, it's based on research and based on logic, they're like, I'm done. Not that I'm done with football or anything. It's just like, I'm done. I'm waiting. Because I'll tell them, I said, look, I'm a semi-pro. I played Division I with the El Paso Scorpions back when they were, Division I. I said, I was a semi-pro level rugby player, man. I said, I'm all about the game. I love the game, but I'm not about right now. I looked at the draft, man, I started crying. I can't watch football anymore because I know these kids are, they're hurting and they don't know how to tell anybody because of the machismo. And I think we can always get to that. And we've seen it, Otis, in our careers back in the day, right? But I think to your point, sir, it's all about awareness. It's raising that awareness, raising that knowledge to do something good. I'm not, Democrat, or I just don't hate you, whatever. It's all about, these are kids, and we all agree as parents, we've got to do what's right with them. And for decades now, we've been doing the wrong thing, but we've been ignorant. And I don't know, the CDC, NIH, a lot of our big organizations, our national health organizations, there's no guidance when you type in contact sports other than a few books that have been written by Chris Nowinski, Dr. Cantu, Julie Stamp, Bennett Omalu. I mean, there's all kinds of books out there you can find. You have to read them. But it's all about saying, look, you have to wait. And this is why, because you are degrading the future, the potential of that human being. Every time he puts on a helmet, goes this way. You cannot play any concussive sport as a child and have other than the potential earnings of income, that 0.8 of 1/10% that you'll get there, you cannot affect anything. That whole curve, their quality of life, their cognitive abilities, their potential as a human being, all goes downhill as soon as you put them in a concussive sport before that brain's ready. Mm-hmm. So it's all about getting that word out, sir. I think that's the key.
One thing, you're talking of the machismo of not wanting to show the weakness of these injuries, whether it's concussive or, otherwise. One of the things, and actually you sparked this conversation with our athletic trainer, who actually, give her a little shout out because she just retired she was
That's
at U of
right, she did. Yeah.
Diane Goodrich, she's amazing. She got me through my 2 years of rugby before I had my back injury, but she got me through that before then. But one of the books she recommended, and we had this whole conversation about it on our flight, was called Shadow Syndromes. And one of the basic core concept there was that you have this full spectrum of what, to take an example, anxiety looks like. That there's this crippling, severe anxiety on this side, and there's a really mild anxiety. And that so many people are along that spectrum, and that they've developed basically coping mechanisms, whether it's just because they're, too tough to say anything about it or whatever, that they go through and they live their life and they don't even realize they have these problems until it becomes so much worse. And I think that's one of the things that comes to mind a lot with this is because I always say when I talk to my college players about concussions, when I got my last concussion, if I was at 100%, I went down to 92%. Couldn't tell you what it was, but I could feel the drop. I could probably tell you logically that every other concussion did the same thing, and I just didn't realize it. It created these, anxiety or depression, these different things that I felt more in my adult life. It was probably already building up at that time, but you learn those little coping mechanisms that then you don't actually have to address it. And I think that's the really interesting thing there, is that how many people are just living with these issues, whether it's from concussive sports or not, and they don't actually properly address them because they figured out how to get through their day-to-day life. It reminds me of another line I heard from a psychiatrist, psychologist, whichever, but about how, most personality traits are coping mechanisms. And I combine that thinking about the Shadow Syndromes book, and it's you have these problems and then you wind up doing, making these changes in your life that put a freaking Band-Aid over it when you need a real solution. And we all know what happens with Band-Aid solutions down the line. Bad things will always happen if you don't properly solve something. That, you gotta, I love this analogy of when you have a wound like that, whether it's mental or whichever, you got to take that Band-Aid off, you got to scrub that thing, and you got to put in the work to actually get better. If you just leave that Band-Aid on, things aren't going to get better. And I think that is the most eye-opening thing for me in this conversation, is just how widespread it is and how we don't take the time to notice how widespread it is, because, well, he did all right in school, so obviously he doesn't have any problems. Oh, well, he's smiling all the time, so he's not depressed. Like, all of these little things that are just coping mechanisms that people are developing that then in the long term create even more problems because it's not properly solving it.
I've got a guy I'd love you guys to talk to. His brother, he runs a project called Challenge 38, the 38 Challenge. His brother, God, I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but his brother they called him Captain America, big, handsome Marine, football, just a beast, man, on the field, and a boxer, played at the Naval Academy, became a Marine Corps artilleryman, and took his life. But him and my son are at the same thing. So his brother started this amazing point because he lived with his brother. So I lived with my son, right? To your point, I mean, you just ripped the Band-Aid off me big time. That coping, yeah, there's a reason I'm loud and boisterous. I'll tell you that. I'm hiding some other stuff, but I sat next to my son every day during COVID, every night, because he liked to do the gaming thing. I can barely walk and chew bubble gum. So I would sit next to him and I'd have my nightcap and we'd talk, and he would be on the thing with his friends, and they'd be yelling and screaming at each other. He'd be having a blast. And I did that all the way up to the night before. And then I was the last guy to see him. And my son struggled with schizophrenia and depression for 3 years and couldn't tell me. And the only thing we only found one guy. He's now my stepson. He's in the 82nd. I needed to clean him up a little bit. He was in a bad place when he came to the service, but I always loved the kid. He was part of my church crew back in the day. And now, he's my step boy. And I got a project, right? And he's in the 82nd. He's a good kid. So I went and found him. I felt compelled to go find this kid. And I said, look, what do you know about Mac? I said, because, buddy, I don't know nothing, and I am dying here. I'm dying, man. I don't know anything. Why is my boy not here? And he goes, PakMan. He says, Mac did ask me for some marijuana, and I wouldn't buy it because I know you'd kill me, but he was hurting so bad. And I was like, what was wrong? And he says, all he told me is that he's having a hard time sleeping. He's having a hard time. He didn't want to play football. And so when people are impulsive, they're waiting for a trigger. My son, we found notes about a month early. He didn't want to be here, but mentally, he wasn't ready to go yet. That was the first day of football practice. And that was his trigger. He was done. And I hugged him in his football uniform. Stand there, handsome, tall, taller than me. Everything I wanted to be when I was 17. He even had hairs on his belly. I'm like, where the hell does that come from? I never had hairs on my belly until I was 30. He said, he had everything going for him, man. Amazing, handsome. I kissed him on the cheek like always. I said, make good decisions. I would. Never saw him again. Okay. Because people won't talk. And his brother, that kid I was talking about, his brother, him and they worked out. He got out of the Marine Corps trying to figure out life. He was struggling. They worked out every day. So his podcast is all about what you just talked about, Cam, is vulnerabilities. And he talks to Green Berets and SEALs and everybody about being vulnerable. And when you're hurting, instead of coping with it, like you said, get it out. Like, I see a therapist now. You lose your kid, you're going to go see a therapist, right? And I never been to one of these things because why, Otis? Only pansies go to therapists, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I got this.
Yeah, right.
I'll figure it out.
I talked to one and I tell her things nobody else knows. I got to tell somebody. Mm-hmm. So, but to your point, Cam, you are spot on. I mean, in America today, I'm not saying guys got to cry and wear makeup and fingernail, whatever, right? I am saying that if you have a loving relationship with somebody, or you're a father, you're a son, and you're hurting, if you just deal with it on your own, it's not going to end as good it could be, right? You could be lucky and it could end up great, but most of the time, all the people I know that have struggled, most of them reached a breaking point because they wouldn't tell anybody when they snapped or hit rock bottom. It was horrible because they could have fixed a lot of things while they tried to fix with other people and getting help. Then they tried to fix it while on their own, you know.
What are the questions we should ask as parents? You know, that you wish you would have asked, that I should have asked, you know, when the kids were younger, to make sure that they really were, you know, because what do our kids want to do? They want to please us, right?
That's the other part.
So we're like, hey, you know, play that sport, you know, and now that you're playing that sport, keep playing that sport. And they do that, they continue to do that, and they think, and probably rightfully so. I mean, you and I are a lot of the same in this. We're like, yeah, look at that kid. That's mine. That's my daughter.
Friday
That's my son.
Life.
Yeah. So what are the questions that us parents, we should have asked? How do we break that?
You know, I think one of the big issues is that a lot of the stuff that I'm finding is all in research papers. It's all there. It's been out there. I've got 30 years of research showing that we never should have been playing sports as a kid. But it's never been put into nobody watches documentaries. You know, it's not public knowledge, the CDC, NIH. So as a parent, I think the problem that I had, Otis, is I thought a concussion was a bad headache. I didn't know a concussion is a TBI. It's called an MTBI, a mild TBI. It's brain damage. Your brain is broke in some way at a cellular level, whatever, right? I mean, and I guess as a parent, I assume I don't know anybody that's hurt themselves in rugby or wrestling or whatever. And the question to ask, I guess, initially is, you know, what can the repetitive head injuries do to my kid's brain, and how does that affect his future? And I think if the knowledge was out there that, look, by putting that helmet on, by putting him on the ice, by putting him in a subconcussive, subconcussive is way worse than concussive trauma. Way worse, because it's continuous, it's insidious, and the point is it can't be diagnosed. When you come off the line, you just had a subconcussive hit. Well, there's not a concussion. You're not seeing stars, and the coach doesn't even know you had it. He saw you come off the line, you cracked heads, right? But you don't have a concussion. That's a subconcussive hit. That insidious form of brain swelling and inflammation is the worst thing for our kids' brains. It messes them up completely. But to your point, Otis, you know, the question is contact sports good for my kid? And I think as the more and more research, as the research is there, the science, when you read my book, you know, it's like, it's all there. I had to go dig it though. I had to go deep into these medical journals and all this stuff. And unless you read the 4 or 5 books on it, right, then there's no science or logic to back you up as a parent. So you're just like everybody else. Well, their kids are playing it. And so what, you know, and I think that's the question that we never asked, because we assumed it was okay, because these kids aren't dying in high school. They're not dying in middle school. They don't die from this stuff, but their lives and outcomes. Cam, I'm using this forever. The outcome, their outcomes are, every one of these kids that have touched the sport for years, their outcomes have been affected. It has been affected. And once we realize that as parents, there is no more power in this world, you know, other than big man upstairs, than a parent's love. We mortgage our house to send them to college. We do everything for our kids. There's a dude, I'll tell you what, I mean, besides, you know, taking a bullet for our guys, we'll get eaten by a grizzly bear. We will die for our kids, and a drop of nothing fires us up more than the love of our kids. So that's why they play sports, because we love them and all that. But we also know, you know, if you take back in the 70s, when your dad put you in the back of a pickup truck at 55 miles an hour, or in the winter and he rolled up the window and everybody's smoking and all the kids are dying and you smell like ashtrays. Or when did you wear a helmet when you rode a bike when you were a kid? And who wore a helmet playing hockey or skiing? Well, or who wore a seatbelt for crying out loud? Well, guess what now? None of that stuff, all that stuff is common.
Yeah.
Getting rid of contact sports with our kid is a natural progression. It should have happened years ago. Why did that stop? Putting on a seatbelt, it was all about fatalities. Now, is by making this public, we got a meeting today to try and get ahead of and try to get in front of the congressional caucus. They have a brain caucus right now, and getting the legislation path going. Whatever we gotta do. But Otis, it's just a hole for parents because the assumptions and the lack of information, the lack of resources, the lack of education. Just look at it right now. My corner, the only reason that I am probably here on this earth, and I'm talking to you, is because my corner, the coroner that Mac saw Mac, was one of a handful. He just happened to take a class on CTE. CTE training is not in part of coroner's training. So that means all these kids that are dying unnaturally, right, are not being assessed. The families just think they killed themselves. In the military right now, we just had some master breacher hurt himself a couple of years ago. I was the first one on a phone call with the DCO, 10th group. And I got to the command surgeon. He goes, "Oh my God." I says, because now I have a little bit of closure for my family now. Because now we know why Mac isn't here. There are thousands of families, right, that don't have it. Your athletic trainer, when my son got hurt, I have an email from that 2017 going, all right, that's number 3. There are no more. I want to know how many concussions my son can have before he's hurt. You know what they did? They couldn't answer it. So they sent me the athletic trainer's guide, 256 pages. Subconcussive trauma, the number one threat to our children, is in the second to last paragraph on page 256 as something that needs to be researched. We know it could be an issue, okay? That is the lack. Medical doctors right now are not trained to ask. Psychotherapists, my therapist said, "Oh my God, Bruce, until I saw you, I'm sending these kids back out to play football because they love it so much." That could be why they're here. Our athletic training, coaching, psychological, medical, and parental communities, which is like all of America, are completely untrained in this phenomenon, in this condition, this issue, and that is killing our kids. It's hurting our kids. It's depriving us, GDP, because these kids aren't as smart as they could be. They're not contributing to our science and society because we're banging their brains around. It's got huge third order effects right now that we have still yet to understand.
My little bit of a soapbox moment that comes to mind. We're talking about vulnerability. What can you do? Makes me think. For even my concussions and mental health and those type of things, is you still have that feeling of you can't talk to everybody about it. But I think the important thing to move it forward is to realize, one, there are people to talk to, and then 2, starting that with your buddies. And, I'm thinking of my rugby friends, that those are the guys I'll talk to about this the most because they get it, because they were there. We were in the rucks together. Like, we were in the scrums together. Like, we were all in it together. And so when we talk about it, there's that connection to where it's like, I feel understood. And so that's kind of my soapbox moment there is, even if you feel like you can't talk to everybody about it, there's other people who know what you're talking about. There's other people who get it. Is the way my rugby buddies always joke. It's like, yeah, no, I get it. Like I got knocked and I would still do it all over again and like all these different things, but you still have to have that vulnerability with each other. And I think, reminds me of our conversations with the Project Refit guys of it's just, there's other people out there who have been through these situations. And even if you feel like you can't talk to everybody about it, you can talk to somebody. And I think that's the baby step forward that I think people need to take. And that starts with vulnerability from your mates and from your friends that you played with and that kind of stuff. Because if you never have that conversation, then they'll never have that conversation with you. It's, if I didn't go to my buddies and say, like I said, that's the way I describe it, 100% down to 92%. If I hadn't said that to my buddies, they wouldn't talk to me about their concussions. They wouldn't. One of my best friends, Grady, he fought a tree. He was skiing up here and he straight into it. That's what ended his career. Smashed his whole face. He's got like 6 plates in his face. Yeah, trees always win. Don't fight the tree.
I'm laughing because, Grady, he may have missed on the skiing. I could see him with a beer in his hand fighting a tree.
and you add speed to the mix. Cam, the only thing I would add to your soapbox moment is to let guys know, and I think this is part of the baby step, is it's okay to talk. It's not an admission. You're not going to grow a set of boobs because you said, hey, man, I'm having a hard day. I'm struggling up here, man, and where Otis and I come from on the A team, dude, you never exposed weakness. I don't care. I mean, whether it was, something that you'd get ridiculed for life, but if you definitely went down the path of I'm struggling with anxiety and all that stuff, you were automatically labeled, coward, pussy. You'd probably get kicked off the team, and I think we're reaching a point like with young men like you, is that we've got to make it sure. We got to let people know, hey, it's okay to talk, man. It's okay to have problems, because guess what? A lot of people have. You wouldn't be surprised how many people have told me they've lost their kids since I mentioned. They don't talk about it, but they say, what's up with your foundation? Like, oh man, or my sister or my nephew. The amount of children we're losing which is just way too much anyway. Just one is way too much. But but by exposing my weakness, they's like, oh yeah, and then we can have some really candid conversations. To your point, yeah, it's got to be okay to talk, and once you do, I think people open up. And
as you continue to talk about it, one of the things that comes to mind is one of my other best friends works with us at Tribe and Purpose, Norman. We'll always phone call, hey, what's good, sir? Hey, how you doing today? And I've reached a point where I feel totally comfortable going, hey man, I'm not all there, like I'm working, like I'm here, like, but it's an off day. And he understands that. He played sports. He was a big lacrosse guy. He was ROTC, like all this. He gets it. And so it's just hey, man, I get it. Like, and he knows, and then he can support. And it's not, coming over and bringing baked goods and all that kind of stuff. It's just him just still being my buddy. That's all, that's all you need from a lot of that stuff, is just feeling seen on that. And then, just like I said, the more you talk about it, the easier it is. And I think that's my big lesson, going through this conversation without jumping ahead to what we learned. It's so important to start that conversation. And then as much as that first one sucks, and it's really hard because I've been there, the more you talk about it, the easier it is. And when you talk with people who understand, it's even easier because you don't have to go through and explain every little thing, because they know what you've been through. They've been through it too. And there's a lot of people out there who have been through it.
No, I absolutely agree with you, man. I mean, it's and it's like I like that kid's podcast, and I never talked about. I didn't even know what a vulnerability was, because you of course can't be vulnerable, right? Men. And then I got on a show. Next thing you know, we're all bawling. I got towels and paper towels, just doing my thing, and but it's good for for guys to feel it's okay to open up, for sure, man. But the more you get into like sports, the higher you get up the levels, just like in the military, it's still taboo. I don't care what people think. They can say it's okay. We got programs. I've got a good friend, sons of Green Baret, and he was struggling hard, like to the point where his dad had to go over the house and help him out. And they have a program. They got into it, but they're like, they're still keeping him in. And they're doing everything they can take him, but he's probably not going to be able to go back and do his job, and it's maybe he shouldn't too, right? Maybe he saved himself, so that's there's just so much there, it's in some ways. I think if you're going to ask me what my lesson is, just not that I'm getting out, it's like I'm just learning. I'm just thinking like there's some things that have not changed in decades, like this whole macho, and part of the reason that a lot of the kids are playing football is their dads played it, right? And either they feel like they've got to play it, or the dad's like, you're playing football, you're gonna be a man, right? I get, I'll tell you what, I'll get on my soapbox a little bit, but this whole thing about being a man, Otis, we made men, all right? We made men, and to be a man, you got to be 18. Till then, they're boys. They're not supposed to be men. I kept telling my son, like all his friends, cell phones, cars, jobs, said, son, you're only a kid once. You'll never be a kid again. Don't grow up too fast, because you're going to look back and go, wish I would have done some more of that video game stuff. So I just always let him just be a child, man, except for this, right? It's just surprising that here we are, talking and according to the news and everything, it gets better. But I still think, I honestly believe on sports teams and in the military right now, it's still, vulnerability is still a huge issue to overcome when you've got that that warrior mentality or whatever your tribe, to your point, Otis, right? Your tribe. You don't want to let your tribe down, and you feel you are if you admit weakness or being vulnerable. And I think tribes need to be more inclusive instead of exclusive because you don't fit no more because are you having problems, whatever it is. But just some thoughts there.
Going back to the outcome conversation earlier, what you just made me think is. So I think we could all agree there are some amazing outcomes from rugby that aren't played in the MLR, which started freaking 4 years ago, right? I got amazing outcomes from rugby that don't include that. When I think about the Engage Foundation and my work with the little kids, I always think like it's the replacement factor is what I always talk about. I just need one kid to fall in love with the game like I did and learn the lessons that I did, and then I did my job. And the fact is, I'm coaching 8-year-olds in two-hand touch, and they are learning the same lessons that I learned bashing my head into somebody. Like you can still learn. Like
it was a book review. That was a book review right there.
There we go. Oh, I'm writing you one. Don't worry. But it's the idea that you need. I think it's just an oversimplification of the sport. Like frankly, to take the rugby example, you only learn how to be a man in rugby because you hit somebody. Bullshit. Come on. You learn how to be a man out there because you fight through things with each other. You get through the fitness together, you teamwork, dedication. When I talk with younger kids, it's all about kindness, respect. That's what makes rugby great. It's not the fact that we hit each other. That's kind of the fun part. We all were forwards. We enjoyed it too. Yeah. But that's not what makes you, that's not the lessons that you move on. When I think about why I like coaching rugby, it's not because I want to teach somebody how to hit somebody. I want to teach them how to be a man and to grow with that. And that doesn't have to come from hits. And I think it's people oversimplifying their sports, oversimplifying their experiences. They look back on it and, it's like, oh, well, my football coach did this. And so that's what my kid needs to become a man. Well, no, what probably happened was he just told you something that stuck with you. And that's it. It wasn't the fact that he made you do suicides and Oklahoma drills. Like that's not what made you a man. It was him telling you to be tough and to work together. And like that's what you actually take away from the coach. It's not like, as much as I look back on my high school careers and the hills we ran up the bank and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't the physical act of running that made me who I am. It was running with the same 30 guys every day. And we're going to see the movies together, all that kind of stuff. Wasn't running into a freaking doing a pick and go right into a post and jamming my head against their knee. That's not what made me a man. It was the act of being around each other and those type of things. And I think it's just, I don't know, that's kind of got me a little bit upset. It's an oversimplification, and it's crappy coaching in that sense, because you can get the benefits in a smarter way.
No, you are absolutely right. I'll tell you what, when my son passed, guess who showed up at his service? My rugby friend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jimmy Donovan showed up, rugby friend. I think I had, a couple of friends, but by far my rugby team made caravans across the country, and they showed up. And I told them this, I played in Aspen last year, and I told them, I said, one of the reasons I'm still here is because you guys gathered around me. And that was my tribe. And they knew my son. I got an amazing story about how we learned how to pour keg beer at the Maggot Fest up in Montana when I broke my leg. Being a dumb, actually, I was crushed by an American football player who took my knee out, instead of hitting me at the waist, right, and broke my leg. But to your point, there's so much positive. We emphasize all the time. This is not anti-sports. It's not even anti-contact sports. It's about playing them right, because to your point, Cam, there is so much more to being on a rugby team than even picking a ball up and hitting another guy. It's all up, learning how to persevere, learning how to get that 40 minutes out. You got that whole 40 minutes out, leave it all on the field. And then the movies, the whole night, that camaraderie, you can't get that anywhere else. Just like we couldn't get it in the military anywhere else other than being on an A team, Otis. And the A teams ain't all about killing people. Right. I mean, hell, I was in 4 different combat zones, and I was prepared to shoot somebody twice. I never killed anybody, but I think I was a pretty good Green Beret, Mm-hmm. So, but to your point, there is so much to sports, and we want our kids to get that out of the sports, the essence of being on a team, the essence of being in a tribe, the essence of camaraderie and loyalty and values and sharing and picking up your other teammate off the ground when you knocked him, when he got down and all that great stuff. And then just keep the brains out of it for now, man. And then, when you're 18, okay, and if I can't get, 14's probably, we're not going to get football out of high schools. We all know that. But can we get the roster larger? And can we get the teams focused on not winning? Because you're not going to win anything in high school that's going to get, bring you money for the rest of your life. Can we just focus on playing sports and having fun? I mean, we used to have our prayer circles after the game, and other teams, we did the line, and, in high, just in rugby, touching your buddies. Then we're all drinking together anyways, stinking and, half naked, whatever. There's just so much out of sports that is so good. But there is a very, very dark side to concussive sports that I'm shining a light on, man. I'm making these cockroaches run, and they know. People know what we've been doing to our children. But it's been, I can get 8 million readings from the CDC or NIH on how to, COVID this and COVID that. Yet I can't, as a parent, get any guidance on whether contact sports is good for my kid. All I get is, this is what a concussion is. Well, all right, thanks, man. But when should my child start playing? What sports do you recommend as my overarching national health organization? NIH is just as guilty. Where is the parents? To your point, Otis, what are the questions? Well, where's the answers, right? Who's going to answer the questions? These are the people that we rely on to answer our questions, and they're silent on this subject. There's no research being done on subconcussive trauma. There's nothing for parents to grab onto to say, okay, I can make a good decision because I have information now. There is nothing. And what do? We go over our experience. I played rugby. I was in the Army. All right. I never wrestled. My son wanted to wrestle. Okay. You're on a mat. How do you get hurt on a mat? Right. Oh, you want to play football? He comes to us. Can I play football, Dad? I'm like, man, I think my chest got up. Hell yeah, man. Man, my boy's a football player. I never played football. I joined the Army. I weighed 112 pounds. All right. And then skiing was our thing. And then, of course, he's like, well, Dad, you learned how to ski. I don't want to take snowboard lessons. So what was he doing? He's up there breaking Breckenridge with his noggin, but he's got a helmet on. I got the best helmet. I got like a $300 helmet. We went and raised $15,000 for helmets for our school. That did not save my son. So that's, to your point, Otis, on the questions. There's no answers. The parents are asking questions, but unless you want to read a book, that's why my book is that big, right? That book, one plane flight, you'll be through my book. And when you get done with my book, your kids are not touching sports till at least high school if they ever touch it again, because it's got to be digestible. And nobody wants to watch. And I finally watched Will Smith's concussion movie the other day with my wife. Dude, amazing, amazing movie, right? And Dr. O'Malley is going to come on the podcast here in a little bit. But dude, there's just so much good that we can get out of this, and we're not doing it. And there's no answers for our parents. So we're putting them all on the website. And man, if you guys got the time to help us spread the word, I made poor decisions. I made uninformed decisions that I thought were in the best interest of my son because I loved him. Yet without the information, my son is not here. And he's one of many, many student athletes that are no longer here. And it's across sports. It ain't just boys. We got girls, rugby players. We got soccer players, and now we want girls to play concussive sports. And just one more point. A soccer ball hits a girl's head with 70% more force because of they have a longer neck to body length and weaker neck muscle structure. But now all right, that's soccer. That's one thing. Now they want to play hockey or they want to play football, and they're out there. I could be like the guys, and we're hurting our kids. They don't need to be hurt. They need to have fun. Sports is supposed to be have fun, man. Fun, right? Let's go have fun. Let's not like all about winning and it's just, I don't know. I think we all have to grow up.
Yeah, we do. Man. I'm going to shift our gears a little bit and get into what we learned, because I know Camden's already, I've been looking at his list, and I don't know. I think I take better notes, but.
Well, you're dad. You're supposed to.
Damn right.
I haven't taken any notes, so.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Testing that short-term memory, Bruce.
Yeah.
Well, that was already blank, bro. Let me just yeah.
Here's what I learned, and I've got several of them, but this one, it popped into my head towards the end, and it's, those kids who perform at the highest level in sports, that get the damage, the subconcussive, and we're doing, that they're getting that brain damage, that's affecting the same ones that could be the leaders in something else besides sports. I never thought about it that way. And I think that's, to me, that's a huge thing, because I mean, whether it's, stick with the team, be part of the team, you got to push through it and all this sort of stuff, or you're going to be, the next Peyton Manning and, multimillionaire, it doesn't matter if you can't think up here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that other 99.2% of the kids that are playing that don't get to that level, they're getting the damage, and they don't have the cognitive skills to push themselves through problem sets in life,
mm-hmm.
to be that leader who finds out how to put these two things together that solves and cures cancer, or energy, or what you name it. We're hindering that opportunity by pushing our kids in sports at the wrong time. I'm not saying don't play sports, because I'm like you, man.
That ain't happening.
It's so important in life, that teamwork, but the right time, so that, when they get to 18 and they want to pursue nuclear physics, they've got the cognitive skills to do it and excel at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the lesson I learned in today.
I want to add on that before I go, and I can't think of the guy's name, but it's an economist. I've read one of his books, and he studies, he likes to put it broadly, of course, cold-hearted economist terms, of losers in life. People who go to jail, people who commit crimes, people who don't make it and wind up being successful. And it's something I think about all the time, of just how do you, in that very broad sense, and it's not a way to be mean, it's just, you could be more successful, the winners versus losers in life, like that. And if there's a variable that increases your chance of being a winner in life, then we need to look at it. You know what I mean? Like, it just like, again, you're saying, the third order effects. Think about how many people are in jail because they got concussions and were too impulsive, and then they went down the spiral, and like it's all of those different things. And I think that's such an important thing to think about in the broad spectrum. You made the comment of like, what does it do to GDP? That makes it sound like we're like belittling this into money, but it's true. It's so true. And so I think I just wanted to build on that there. But for me, what I learned, I got two, because one's real quick. Bruce, you're definitely a prop, because when you said you're talking about toughness in rugby, you said 40 minutes. We play 80. The rest of us at the
I'm I'm talking about getting through the half.
Okay.
You get to that 40. All right, as a prop, you're right. I'm looking for that. What is that whistle? Okay. Water.
All right, I wasn't going to let you get away with that one. Okay. But the biggest thing is what you said about, no header and no check for soccer and hockey, respectively, 30% increase in participation. USA Rugby is trying to drive up participation. That is our big thing. They talk about getting the grassroots, and we got the freaking World Cup coming here. They're trying to play it on both ends of the spectrum. 30% increase in participation. That sounds pretty darn good to me. Take the lessons that's out there from other sports, apply it to yours. Because if we get 30% more people, again, kind of going to the economics of it, you get 30% more people playing rugby. That's 30% more dues. Then we don't have to be paying the freaking All Blacks still for the game they played 2 years ago that we're in debt for some reason. Like, all those different things, it goes hand in hand. So I think, I don't know, that stood out so much to me as like, just come on, like, that's so obvious of a better path forward, as far as you get the better outcomes for the kids, and then you get the better outcome for your organization and for your sport as a whole, because you get more participation. Like, that's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, and I think we're hitting on the same points, and I talk about this all the time. But two of the points that came up in these conversations today, are very salient, and you brought them both up. And I'm going to remember one, and I'm going to forget the other. But the first one is that GDP, right? Is the amount of human potential that we have lost by kids not reaching their full potential as human beings because of their cognitive or psychological issues is enormous, in my opinion. Okay, in my opinion. You mentioned criminality and aggressiveness. I just found a study today where the prefrontal cortex in most criminals, there's a direct correlation between the prefrontal cortex size and degradation and criminality and impulsivity. That is the primary piece of the brain that's affected in contact sports, right behind the head, rugby, the whole 9 yards. And of course, I can't remember the other point, but you brought it up a little bit earlier. But it's all about getting back to having fun with the kids and the participation in flag sports. We actually are running proofs of concepts. We will pay teams to get off leagues, to get off contact rugby and go to touch, because it is the future. It makes sense. It takes care of all of our people, of our most precious resource, and it's just it's what's got to be done. And I will work with you to get that to you, because you're actually taking kids out of a path where they're, and that was the other thing, outcomes. I've never heard that word used like that before. And that goes kind of line in line with the human potential. Every time they touch that sport, their outcomes go this way. All right. There's no doubt about it. There's absolute correlation with concussive sports developing brains in poor outcomes or poorer outcomes. And the point about that study and aggressive impulsivity and criminality all being tied together is one of those outcomes. So I would love to just keep working with you guys. You're two of the smartest men I know. Okay, you got big brains. You're thinking all the time. And how can we, of course, I'm in this for the mission, right? I'm in this for the kids, right? And the parents that don't know, that allowed their kids to play sports, which in all honesty, I thought was perfectly good. I had absolutely no idea at all that my son never even got in a fight. He never even had a bad report card. This kid, this is how tough he was mentally. He kept it all together until that last day in front of his family, his friends. I hacked his Xbox and talked to his gamer friends. And they were all angry because he didn't talk to them, because they love gaming with him. But that's the other part that we need to get these kids and adults to understand it's okay to talk. I'll send you a link, Otis, Cam, to a website. There's over 4,000 adults on that website, all with significant concussive histories, all with major mental health disorders. And they're not getting any support because you can't diagnose CTE. You can't diagnose, a white matter changes. Well, you can, but you got to go spend some money and all this stuff. It's not, tomorrow I can wake up and decide, and I'm not being political here, but hey, you know what? I'm going to identify as a girl tomorrow. Okay, I can do that. And I can go to a therapist or a doctor, and there's a diagnosis and there's a chart and all that stuff. I can't go to a doctor right now and said, look, I played concussive sports for this long. I've had this many concussions, lost of conscious the whole 9 yards. You're going to look at you and say, what do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. Right? You're like, I'm suffering. All right, here's some pills. But they're not going to send you to a brain treatment center or do anything that you can, hyperbaric chambers, whatever it is out there. There's all kinds of stuff. But a lot of this, unfortunately, is irreversible once they get in their 20s and 30s, and it just gets worse. So it's all about delaying and stopping. So whatever, I appreciate the time. Honestly, we're going to get this podcast on our media channels, right? And then we're going to start sending people back. Your marketing, but I really appreciate the time, man. I learned a lot today. I really did. You guys brought out a lot out of me, and that whole coping thing, man, boy, that hit me deep. I'm gonna go make an appointment with my therapist right now.
So, Bruce, how do folks support the foundation? Get in touch with you to work with you and continue to build that momentum of education.
Well, right now, I guess this is one of the few times you'll hear a foundation say, well, we don't need any money. We're not looking for the cash. It's about raising awareness. Like, how old's your kid? Are you playing football? Oh, dude, here, we'll send you bracelets. We got, like, for store owners, we got little plaques with Mac's picture on them and the story and a bag of bracelets, and they give them out. We got stores around here that support us. It's not about supporting the foundation. It's the message. Contact sports are not good for developing brains. Let the kids grow up. And then if they want to go make millions, at least after that, they're going to have a good life. Their outcome is going to be good. They got money and a healthy lifestyle and a brain that's still kind of working. It's still going to be dinged a little bit, but starting in high school is going to mean the world of difference to so many futures out there. So yeah, just spreading the word. We made the book as cheap as possible. If people need that book and they can't, I'll pay for it. If they want that book,
name of the book again, please. Name of the book again.
Yeah, it's called Youth Contact Sports and Broken Brains, and it's going to be out the 22nd of this month on Amazon and wherever else we can send it for download. But I'll send you guys. I'm in the final rough draft. I'll send it to you today. You can just zip through it. If you'd like to comment on the book, and like you were saying, Cam, some of those thoughts you have, man, I'm going to go back and kind of look at what can parents do. Love you to focus on that section of the book. And because when you start talking about poorer outcomes, what parent in their right mind wants to hear that this can lead to a poor outcome? That is an amazing outcome for me of this conversation. I can't thank you enough for bringing that to my attention. That's going to be on the tip of my tongue every time I speak. And I'm going to send them to the Cam and Otis show. Where'd you learn that? Outcome. That's a big word for a sergeant major. You got to get on the Cam and Otis show, dang it.
That's a $3 word right there.
Right. $3 word. $3 Wednesday.
Awesome, brother. Man, we really appreciate what you're doing. I know it. I know the reason for it wasn't good, but man, we're making the best of it, and I love that, and I love you for what you're doing, man. I do appreciate that.
Thanks, bro, man. Always loved you. You were one of the few company commanders I ever loved, man, in Special Forces, man. You were a good one, man. You and Mark Marchand, there was a couple other good ones, but you're one of a handful, bro. And I really appreciate you both for letting me come on the show and sharing, what we're trying to do with this grief and pain and turn it into something positive. And if there's anything we can do for you, we'll start spreading the word. Best to you both. God bless you both, man. I love you, man. A lot of love going out. And we'll catch you later on, okay?
All right, man. Camden, run us out.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to this episode of the Cam and Otis Show. Special thanks to our guest, Bruce Parkman, for joining us for today's episode, and to our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. Follow the Cam and Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening. You can check out a full archive of our episodes at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.